Kyle Kalu, we've just finished season 2.
I know. How exciting was that? I can't even believe it when someone said that it was like 30 something episode. Like we just kept going and going and going. And you were kind of like a stickler for 5 more episodes, 10 more episodes. Let's record 5 episodes today. Guys, he was crazy with the amount of episodes he wanted. Like we could just kept talking
Is
and
that really
talking.
how you want to start this?
I'm sorry. Anyway, so
Yeah.
guys, thank you for listening to season 2 of our Inspired Action for Imperfect Humans. So, although we've come to a close, there's a few things coming up. Like, what does that mean for us, right?
Well, first thing that I want to let people know is that we will be back on January 4th with season 4 of the podcast. And we've got a whole bunch of new exciting topics. And we're going to really dig into some things. I think that people really enjoy feeling validated. The feedback we've had is that people enjoy feeling validated, saying that I'm not the only one that thinks this way. And
Right.
so I think that we're going to continue to build off of those topics, which unfortunately puts you in a limelight and a lot of liability. So if you feel like resigning today, go ahead. Second thing is
Well, hold on there for a second. Hold on there for a second, because not only that folks really enjoyed it, a couple of the feedback we also got is that it's bite sized. Like it wasn't long, it was just enough for them because we know sometimes people need time to think, reflect, take action on certain things. So that's what was really nice about it. And I think people also, I mean, at least I got a flooded amount of people saying how you abused me, how I was victimized during this whole process, which I think is fantastic. So
yeah, I think that's awesome. So people are probably wondering, Kyle, um, what are they going to do in the interim, right? And they're probably a little confused because I said we were going from
season
podcast 2
4.
to podcast 4.
Yeah, season
And so
2 to season 4.
here's what's happened, folks. I'm
Mhm.
on human resource probation. I'm not allowed to be on the podcast. And you know who's in charge of Kyle is our CEO, but Kyle's also our HR. So I mean there's no conflict of interest there.
Oh
So he has
man.
actually kicked me off the podcast for a few episodes for
Couple months.
for well really season 3. So I think it'll probably be 2 months, Kyle, for from starting next week, which I think is November 9th, all the way until
Yeah, right after 9th, because this is airing on the 9th. So yeah.
oh, this is airing on the 9th.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
so from November 16th to basically December 28th, these folks have to grin and bear it and nod their heads and just get through what you have planned for them. But actually, I am really excited about what you're doing, despite the fact that I dislike you so tremendously. I think this is probably one of the best ideas you've ever had in your whole life, and we
Wow.
don't get many. So
Wow. So you're saying as a true immigrant, I'm the only immigrant left, that I still have to work while you take a break. Is that what you're saying? That's really
I
what it
did
is.
not hang on. Careful where you're taking this. I did
I'm
not
just
say that I
saying.
wasn't working during this time.
I'm just saying.
So,
I
Kyle,
still have to do it.
why don't you tell me? Let's actually just start with what are you talking about
Mhm.
for season 3? This little mini season that you're doing. What are you going to be talking about?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Only because what
Oh,
happens
girl, you
is
don't have to tell me it's a good question. I know it's a good question. I just need you to answer it.
well, here's a little bit of context, right? So, as you know, and I know you know this, I work with a lot of senior leaders and leaders, emerging leaders, people who either want to get into leadership, people who want to understand, leadership a little better. There's some people who just like, how do I up my game, right, with leadership? And so, every time I'm usually talking to a certain event or something like that, oftentimes people will come up to me and they just kind of want to understand, like, why does my leaders do this, or why do leaders in general think a certain way, act a certain way, or sometimes don't even provide that type of mentorship. So, they're asking really to just what I would like to say is debunk the misconception out there of leaders, right? So the part that really they want to understand is the human side, right? Because they're human. I know you may feel that sometimes that they're not, just by how they do and think and say things, but they're humans. And which means, like our podcast, they are also imperfect. right? They have taken some inspired actions along the way. So I kind of wanted an opportunity to showcase that.
So Kyle, it's kind of like you're tapping into the mindset and the human aspect of how some of these executive leaders think, and some of these CEOs. You're tapping into some of that. So this is probably good for people who want to understand how their leaders work, so that they can tap into that mindset. But who else is this for?
Yeah, this is great, because just before I get into that, is like what we've said in the podcast for those who are listening in season 2, right? Is that some leaders show up a little bit differently, and sometimes, I think we mentioned the whole open door policy, right? Because I hear that quite often from leaders who will say, "Hey, I have an open door policy. You could come in. You could come in anytime." And sometimes what they don't realize is the open door policy is there for them to also walk out. Right? Is for them to also tap into that. So the idea is we really want people, listening on the mini series of season 3 is more around emerging leaders. Either you're new to leadership, want to think about leadership, or you're a senior leader and you want to take your leadership game to that next level. And this is really going to offer those folks some mentorship as well, because that's the other thing, unfortunately, that they don't seem to tap into, right? And
what about those folks that don't have any interest in aspiring to leadership? How might this help them?
This will help them because at some point they have a leader, right? So how do they actually manage up? How do they understand maybe what their leadership in the organization might be thinking or doing? And really it's like most things, this is so transferable for you to even be a better team member. Because we've done some of recordings already, so I'm going to give you guys a little sneak peek there. We've done some of the recordings already for the season 3, and it's interesting to hear from some of these leaders when they start out. They didn't start out as a leader. Some of them didn't even want to be a leader. Some of them thought that wasn't even an option. So to your point, you never know if you're going to be a leader, or for one particular person that we recorded already, he was placed into leadership. Like there was no option. Like he just had to be. And, he wished he had some of this knowledge prior to doing that.
Well, and I know, Kyle, that you tap into some of the imperfect parts of it too. And I think that this is really important for people, because certainly doing what we do for a living, particularly in my practice, there's so much focus on the employee aspect of this, that the team member, or the for lack of a better term, the subordinate. I hate that word, but there's this hierarchy that's created in the minds of the employee, in their minds. And so they're intimidated to talk to their leaders. They're intimidated to have a conversation with them. They're intimidated to even ask the question, why are we doing this? Like, how does this help us? How does it, they're intimidated to even bring that stuff forward. And what I would just say is that I think the value is really there for those people in understanding how these folks think. Kyle, can you tell us some of the, like, one or two of the names that you've got coming in, and who you're talking to?
Yeah, this is great. Great question. We have Shane Wenzel from Shane Homes, the CEO and president from that is going to be on there. We have Marshall Toner from JLL Canada and Damien Mills. These are executive leaders in this organization. Glenn Mangling as well from First Services. He's the president of First Services. And so he has a really interesting perspective on leadership as well. And then we have April Crane from WestJet. She's a senior leader in the communication side of it. So, and there's a few more we're working on, but that's just the top of the head names.
I mean, this sounds super cool to me, and I cannot wait to hear from some of these leaders and kind of how they think. Kyle, where do you take us on the podcast? So if we're going to listen, because clearly I'm not allowed to participate. So what can I expect when I sign in, like everybody else on the planet, and listen to this podcast?
I'm sure people are going to send us some things like, where's Christopher? Like, what would Christopher has to say about this? But listen, we'll definitely be able to take a look at that. As far as where do I take them, by listening, you will gain, I find everyone who's listening is going to be able to gain a better understanding of what it takes to deliver at a senior level, at even in leadership, because there's a few of them will talk about their up and coming leadership, get real on some strategies and tactics, right? When it comes to curating that coaching culture in an organization, right? Which is about making sure people have access. This is not just for executive levels, right? Coaching is about how do we, allow frontline to have better insights, gain insights about their own skill set. And as well as these leaders, what's interesting about it is they actually tap into some of their failures and what they deem to be successes as well. So, that is the journey I really want to take them on, is for them to hear what their experience has been like, what could some things that they can do, right? So the people who are listening, what are some things that they can do in reflection and get to where they are today, and how they define failures and successes. That I think is going to be really the most interesting, is hearing what they defined as a failure and what success looked like for them.
I agree. Kyle, give me one or two of the questions that you ask these people, because I'm curious to see where's the gossip? Like, what's the nitty gritty on it? What do you just one or two of the questions you're asking these people that folks are going to want to tune in for?
Yeah, you're sounding like you're asking what's the tea, right? Is that what you're saying? Like,
what's the tea, girl? And then we'll see the shade.
Here are some questions I think about is what did they think leadership was when they first started? And what has that journey been like for them? Because I think sometimes we have this perception that as a senior leader, they get everything is easy for them. It was probably on a servant platter. And some people may not think that, but they may not know actually about the journey. So I ask about that. Another question I really kind of hone in on is, what are some of your key failures? And how did they even address that? Especially that common thing that we've talked about. I know you and I talk about it often. We blog about it, as well as that fear of failure concept, right? And so I really want to talk to them about, what does that look like? The other part of it is, what is the silver lining for some of those, with some of those failures? Like, did it work out for them? Did it not work out? What would they do even differently? Would be some of them. And this is always my favorite question when we talk about this, is about what would they tell a younger leader? What would they tell someone who's maybe new to leadership, who wants to? Because the head fake on that question, Christopher, is more about what are they telling their younger self? If they could speak to their younger self when it comes to this type of thing, what would they actually say?
Do you know what I think that question really is? It's, what are you telling yourself now?
Interesting. I love that. Never looked at it that way. I love
that.
And
let's just put a full stop on where did you fail? Because I think that people really need to, people need to understand that every single one of these leaders has had failures. And I think it's super important for folks who are not in leadership or emerging leaders to recognize, you're not an imposter and you're probably going to fail at some stuff. So I'm really looking forward to this, Kyle. Kyle, what is one last thing that people need to know about this podcast? What's something that they need to know as they step into it?
I think, what they need to know is, like everything else, we have misconceptions, right? We have a story we tell ourselves, and this is not new for anyone. We also tell ourselves a story. And these guys are senior leaders, no matter where they are in the chain of leadership. They too have failures, and they are imperfect humans, and what's interesting about it is they have no problem stepping into it. They actually step into that, right? And you'll hear some of those things. And, some of them have even used that word that I struggled with, right? That you kept pushing down my throat, the vulnerability word, right? And some of them have said, listen, I had to be vulnerable. I had to do those things. And so I know I struggled with it in the beginning, not because, I'd like to say not because I don't want to be vulnerable, is because I was so always looking at moving forward. And I missed opportunities to slow down, right? How many times have you said that to me? Slow
down. Boy,
down.
did you ever. Oh man, we know that there's some research on coaching cultures out there, and we know that in terms of bottom line, employee productivity, loyalty, the whole bit, there's research that supports a culture of coaching. And so I really do believe that this podcast is going to be fun. It's going to be inspiring. It'll be something a little bit different as we head into the Christmas break. Folks, I'm planning on sneaking in at least once here before January 1st, but don't tell Kyle.
Probably
He
until I
doesn't need to know.
expect it.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Kyle. I'm looking forward to this. I hope that our listeners are too. And yeah, good luck with it, my friend.
Thank you. And let us know if, as we're going through the mini series, if this is something that later on you want us to bring back or you want to know more of, that type of feedback would be fantastic. And don't forget, if you're not sharing our podcast, what are you doing? Where are you at?
Yeah, folks, come on. Share it, download it. Share it, rate it, let us know what you think. Also, if you'd like to hear me have my own mini series about something that's really interesting to you, I think you should tell us that. Oh, okay. All right then.